Well, local councils are raking in £400 million in terms of fines. New supermarkets, if they're putting a new car park, you can absolutely guarantee it. They're going to put in a new machine. You have to type in the code. If you get the code wrong, you're going to get a fine. There's councils have received an 8% surge in revenue, according to the RAC, 376 million in the last year. It's now basically a multi-million-pound business. Well, to tell us more and help us navigate our way through this money-making trap, Mr. Loophole himself, Nick Freeman. Good morning, Nick.
Well, morning, Katie.
Good morning. Now, is it just me, because I've been driving a lot more in the last few weeks than I normally do, or is it just becoming more and more apparent that wherever you go now, we're getting more fines?
No, it's not you. You're absolutely right. In fact, I got a ticket on my birthday, the 23rd of December.
Oh, happy birthday.
The system was designed to make you fail. No lights, tiny writing. I purchased a ticket. It was that dark, the car park attendant couldn't see the ticket, which was on the front dash. So obviously, I will be pursuing that. But these systems are designed to raise revenue for the councils. They're very difficult. A lot of the machines are very difficult to operate, and as you rightly said, it's a huge industry now, generating millions and millions of pounds per year.
Well, one of the things that really does strike me is not only have you got to use a machine, but often you have to use your mobile phone. There's no way of paying cash to park in some of these places now. It's not very kind of senior, old age friendly, is it?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say, it took me 15 minutes to manage to get a ticket out of the machine with the help of other people. One of the reasons was, on one machine you had to use a phone, and I don't know how to do that, and the other machine, the print was so small, without glasses you can't see it, and there were no lights on the machines at all. So as I said, the whole system is designed to floor you, to make sure that you make a tiny mistake so that they will extract revenue from you. And of course, if you've basically paid, and if you've inserted the wrong digit, or you've made a slight mistake and you get a ticket, you must challenge it, and you challenge it all the way through. You don't roll over. Of course, what they're trying to do is you get a ticket. After the initial stress and aggravation, you think, I'm just going to pay whatever it is. Outside London, it tends to be about £25 if you pay it quickly, and don't just take the least line of resistance, because it's time is money and people are very busy and they just don't want the aggravation and stress in challenging things.
But it's not just that, Nick. It's also the fact that they threaten you with much larger fines, and your fear that you could end up in court because of an honest mistake is so great that you just cough up.
That's exactly right. It's the whole process it's intimidatory, and of course you can't ignore it. Some people just bury their head, think it will go away, and of course what then eventually happens is you have the bailiffs coming around forcing entry into your house. So you can't ignore it. You have to deal with it, and you have to make the right representations at the right stage, and it's imperative that you do that. And it's also imperative that you take any photographic evidence you've got of the machines, make notes of the lack of light, the small print, the lack of proper signage, anything that you can sort of obtain to help you fight the case. That's what you must do. And you also must say to the council, when fighting, or to the private company who's going to pursue you, that you lay out exactly what's happened, and you advise them what your hourly rate is. And because why should we spend hours and hours fighting these things for no charge? So depending on what you do, you elect a reasonable and fair hourly rate, advise them of that as well, and if you win, you raise a bill against them and you pursue them for those outstanding charges.
Can you actually do that? I mean, how many people succeed in that?
Absolutely. Well, I will be doing it. I'm going to be doing it. I received a ticket on Bridge Street in Manchester, which is a system designed to make you fail, and I will be advising them of my hourly rate. Obviously, it won't be my full hourly rate because that will be not appropriate, but I will put forward a reasonable hourly rate. I will advise them exactly what's happened, send them a copy of the ticket, send them all my observations about it, and when I win the case, I will be pursuing them for all my costs that are incurred.
Good for you. Good for you. Is it not enough just to say in your case that this was an honest mistake? You punched in the wrong number.
I didn't make it. I haven't made any mistakes.
No, but not in your case. But just generally speaking, a lot of people actually do buy tickets. They don't just park where they want and dump the car.
Yep.
They do buy tickets, but they get it wrong.
The majority do. But the problem is this: when you enter a car park, you are in fact entering into a contract with the owner of the land, and they lay down the specific terms that you're implied to accept. And one of those is correctly inserting the right number plate, the right digits, whether it's the last three numbers or letters of your number plate. So that is what they would say is a fundamental term of the contract. So when you make a mistake, on the face of it, you're in breach of contract, although the whole spirit of the exercise is designed so that they are paid for the space that you're occupying. That's what it's really about. So that their approach is, well, you're in breach of contract, and therefore we're going to pursue this fine against you. But normally good sense does prevail at some stage in the appeal procedure, and you will succeed. So because you've made a mistake, you shouldn't say, oh, I've made a mistake, I must pay. You write and tell them, look, I've made a mistake, but here's the ticket, I have paid, I've not overstayed the amount that I've paid, I've not overstayed my time, and you will win.
Of course, lots of people get caught out by those.
That process.
Lots of people get caught out by those AMPR cameras now, don't they? So when they think that there might not be a charge, they think they can pop in for 10 minutes and go out again. The cameras have snapped their number plates, and that's it. The next thing they know is they're going to get a letter through the post.
Yeah, well, we also have to remember that these people have acquired the land. The land belongs to somebody. Someone's had to purchase the land. They've had to maintain it. They have to put people on it. So there is a cost involved. And in the same way that you wouldn't expect someone, or I wouldn't expect someone to come and park on our drive without our permission and without possibly charging them an appropriate amount. It's the same. We're not entitled to just use people's land for nothing. So as long as it's a fair rate and the signs are clear, it's right that you pay that fair amount. And if there are cameras there, normally you have, for example, in Sainsbury's, you have 2 hours free. If you overstay that, well, it's right and fair that you're fined for that. And I don't think anyone can seriously grumble at that. If you have emergency circumstances that explain the reason why you overstayed your welcome, for example, you might have been shopping and you might have had a child who was suddenly taken ill and you might have had to rush to a doctor around the corner, that sort of situation, you inform the car park, the company, of those emergency circumstances, and you provide any corroborative evidence, and you will win at some stage in the procedure. Possibly not at the first stage, but certainly at some stage in the procedure you will win. So quite often common sense does prevail, and you just need to pursue it calmly and all the way through.
Now, the government have kind of cottoned on to the fact that people are very unhappy with the current system, and lots of people feel that they're unfairly targeted. And there's a parking bill going through Parliament at the moment. Is there a difference between getting a fine from the councils, who are generally well behaved, although they are raking in 400 million a year, it seems, according to the RAC, they're generally well behaved compared to what we now know as kind of cowboy charges, where they send you an invoice and they're hoping that you're going to pay up, but they probably don't really have a leg to stand on? Or is it kind of both councils and those in private land just as bad as each other?
The councils obviously are licensed, but people who enforce fines, they have to comply with certain regulations, and the fines have to be fair and reasonable. So the days of the cowboys, the days of clamping and sort of wholly inappropriate behaviour have gone. But as you said earlier, there is this degree of intimidation involved, which frightens people basically to cough up. And that's why you need to remain calm, and you need to just check the circumstances. And if you have made a mistake, and if you have overstayed, wherever it is, for a period of time, and normally you have a 10-minute leeway, that is, regarded in law as fair and reasonable. You're allowed an extra 10 minutes. You shouldn't abuse that, but it's a general rule that you're allowed 10 minutes. But if, for example, you've just overstayed because you've forgotten or whatever, then you should pay, and you should pay straight away because it's a less fine. But I think the majority of people are caught out, and they should fight it. And the vast majority of people who do challenge these, whether they're by council or private companies, are successful.
And Nick, being an expert in this area over many years, talk us through exactly what the challenge looks like. I mean, do you end up in a court scenario? Do you end up in a tribunal, where you're having to give evidence? Because that's quite intimidating for some people.
No, it isn't. It's incredibly informal. You can deal with it in writing, or you can deal with it in person. And the procedure is very, very informal. There's nothing at all. It's not a court of law. It tends to be a small room. There may be ultimately the ombudsman there. He or she will listen very patiently to what you have to say. You have a conversation and a decision is made. So there's nothing at all intimidating about it. It's a very simple process. And as I say, it's simply a case of following common sense and logic and just making sure that you have all the circumstances available, that you're able to present them in a clear, cohesive and lucid manner. And as long as you've got a reasonable case, you will probably win.
Do you have any examples that come to mind, Nick, in terms of cases where you thought that, people were about to pay and you thought, no, well, I really do think that this is wrong and we can put this right?
Well, I have to say to you, Katie, I thought I was being invited on the show to talk about theft of blue badges, but I'm quite happy to talk about car parks.
But I'm coming on to that in a second, because I think that's just as interesting.
I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, but one typical example is people who put in the wrong, they make a mistake about the number plate, which is so
I've
easy
done that before.
to do. And if you write to them and tell them, look, I've made a mistake, here is the ticket I've paid, quite often at the first instance, they will find against you and they'll say, well, you're in breach of the terms and it's tough luck, you should be more careful. Don't shy away from that. Just pursue it. And eventually, you'll if you get as far as reaching the ombudsman, you will, or the tribunal, you will have a sympathetic audience who will say, yes, you have made a mistake, but it's an insignificant mistake because you've paid for your time there, and you will win. But what these people are trying to do is wear you down. As I say, unfortunately now, many of these systems are designed to make you fail, and they're relying on people being too busy or too stressed, and it's our duty as members of the public not to roll over, not to let them take advantage and say, we are going to resist this if we have a proper case. As I say, if you've made a mistake, you pay up early, that's right and proper. But if it's a mistake whereby the car park company isn't disadvantaged, so if you've inserted the wrong digit and that's plain for everyone to see, but you've paid your fee, why you've done nothing wrong, you've made an innocent mistake. Ultimately, you shouldn't be punished for that in any way, shape or form.
Well, as you just mentioned earlier, just as angry as it makes me for councils to be finding people for honest mistakes, especially older people that can't work the machines or the mobile phones properly, they might be in their 80s, still driving, but used to putting coins into machine.
Yep.
What also makes me very angry is a rise that we've seen at the moment in the abuse of blue badge. It's either theft of blue badges or fake blue badges being made and gone on the black market, and a clampdown on that. Have we seen a real rise? Is it just me? I've seen a couple of stories here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. You're bang on the money. In the last 12 months, the number of prosecutions have almost doubled in the last 12 months, and during the last 5 years, I think the statistics show there has been a rise year on year. And one of the reasons I think we're seeing this is because car parking is becoming extremely expensive, particularly for people in London. The people who steal these blue badge holders, and when I say they steal, they're using them dishonestly. However they acquire them, whether it's a relative who isn't in the car, whether it's a relative who's passed on and they're still using it, or whether they've duplicated one, photocopied one illegally. However they're doing it, in London they don't have to pay a congestion charge, so they're saving straight away about £2,500 a year, which is a significant amount. And whilst councils are fairly rigorous in their prosecutions, there are something like over 2 million people who have blue badges in the country, a massive number. So the number of prosecutions are for the total number of abusers is very, very small, because obviously it's a resource problem, and people take the view it's worth the risk, bearing in mind at the moment the maximum fine is only £1,000, and that's plus, of course, the charges for the illegal car parking that you might have incurred, or congestion charge. So people take the risk on the basis, well, it's worth taking. I'm probably going to get away with it. They're not going to know this. And the system, in my view, the penalty system certainly needs to be reviewed. And because of the lack of resources enforcing it, I always think if you have a penalty that's sufficiently severe, it tends to almost police itself. So, for example, instead of just having a maximum fine, if you imposed a period of disqualification to accompany people who are misusing these blue badges, that would, I think, make people think very carefully, is it actually worth the risk? Not only am I going to pay a financial penalty, but I'm going to be taken off the road for, say, a period of 6 months or whatever the government deems appropriate. And I think that would rule out very quickly a significant percentage of these people who are abusing them, because it's not just theft, it's also fraud. They're in effect obtaining a pecuniary advantage by deception. And of course, probably more important than all that, they're depriving people who are needy, who need these places, who need them freed up, of where they need to park. And
Well, that's what gets me the
available.
most. That's what gets me the most. I think we should name and shame these
And I
people
agree with you
on the
completely.
internet, on Twitter.
Absolutely.
If
That
they
was
get
the next thing I was
convicted.
going to say.
Yep.
After they're convicted, because you mustn't do
Of
it
course.
before they're
Of
convicted,
course.
they should be named and shamed. But then I think to myself, well, is there any shame in society anymore? I'm not sure. We've probably not quite reached that point, but we're getting close to it where people aren't ashamed of whatever they do.
Oh no, it's 2019. I was hoping to turn the new year with a new optimistic
Sorry.
start, Nick.
Sorry.
Well, I tell you, I don't know what your hourly rate is. I would imagine it's quite high, and it's great
no,
to have.
to be quite honest
it's great
with
to
you,
have your advice.
I don't actually do an hourly rate. And my general rule is I tell the client how much it's going to cost from the start, all in, so they know exactly what it is, and then we move on.
Well, we feel like we've had some free advice from you this morning, so thank you so much for joining us. That's Nick Freeman, who is known as Mr. Loophole in the world of motoring experts.